The viewing chamber of the Galactic Consortium's central spire fell silent as the holographic display flickered with footage from humanity's latest conflict. The assembled representatives, 14 species from across the known galaxy, watched with growing unease as human vessels, drastically outgunned, formed a defensive perimeter around a small colony world. "Observe their tactics," High Counselor Vex said, his translucent appendages gesturing at the display. "They're sacrificing an entire defense fleet for a settlement of barely 2,000 souls." Ambassador Zuli of the methane-breathing Troll Confederacy leaned forward on her hover pad. "The mathematics make no sense. The resources required to replace those ships would fund the evacuation and resettlement of that colony 50 times over. The humans on screen executed a maneuver that should have been impossible given their technology level. 3 cruisers deliberately collided with the attacking force, their reactors detonating in precisely calculated sequence. The resulting electromagnetic pulse disabled the enemy's targeting systems long enough for the colony's evacuation ships to escape. That's the 4th such incident this standard year," Vex continued. "Their unpredictability makes them dangerous. Their expansion rate has tripled since we first detected them. At this pace, they'll reach Consortium core worlds within 2 decades. The chamber erupted in overlapping communication frequencies until Elder Mox of the Crystalline, Quar, silenced them with a resonant tone from his vibrational sac. "We have options short of direct intervention," he reminded the assembly. "The containment protocols have failed with humans," interrupted Security Director Hahn, a hulking arthropoid whose chitinous armor clicked with each agitated movement. "Trade restrictions, technological quarantine, proxy conflicts, they adapt too quickly. Each measure intended to slow their advancement has accelerated it." The debate raged for 17 standard hours before the Consortium reached its decision. They would employ the one force in the galaxy that had never failed a contract: the Vorax. Commander Draz's command center was carved from a single asteroid, tawed through 17 star systems over the centuries as the Vorax mercenary fleet expanded their influence. Unlike the ornate chambers of the Consortium, the walls here were unadorned except for trophy weapons taken from conquered species. Draz himself sat motionless in the gravity well of the center. A silicon-based life form evolved on a radiation-bathed death world with triple Earth's gravity. His crystalline exoskeleton bore fracture lines from hundreds of battles, sealed with precious metals that told the story of his victories better than any decoration could. The Consortium emissary, a small gelatinous being, trembled slightly in the crushing gravity as it presented the contract terms through an environmental suit. "Twice your standard fee," it burbled, with a bonus structure for expedited timeline. "The Consortium requires only containment and demonstration of superior force. Extermination is not necessary, merely submission." Draz's sensory filaments extended, absorbing the data packet containing intelligence on the target species. His neural crystals processed the information in nanoseconds. Humans, oxygen brothers, carbon-based, short-lived, technologically primitive by Vorax standards. Curious creatures, he mused, mandibles clicking thoughtfully as he studied footage of human children playing war games, soldiers returning to battle after losing limbs, and historical archives of their countless internal conflicts. But soft, nonetheless. The data showed weaknesses to exploit: fragile bodies requiring narrow environmental conditions, emotional attachments that created strategic vulnerabilities, limited sensory capabilities, and a concerning tendency toward internal factionalism. "We accept," Draz announced, reaching a crystalline appendage to seal the agreement. The Consortium emissary visibly relaxed. "The Vorax have never failed a contract," Draz added, a statement of fact rather than boast. "Infiltration begins immediately. Strike forces will deploy within 1 standard cycle." After the emissary departed, Lieutenant Krell approached the command well. Unlike Draz, her exoskeleton was unblemished, its natural blue-black surface still showing the smooth facets of youth. "I've begun preliminary infiltration," she reported. "A human survey vessel near the Cygnus Arm." Minimal defenses, optimal for intelligence gathering. Proceed, Draz ordered. Capture the crew intact. I want to understand these creatures before we break them. 3 solar days later, Krell returned to the command center. Her pristine exoskeleton now bore a jagged crack across one sensory cluster. The human vessel has been neutralized, she reported, but we obtained no prisoners. Draz's sensory filaments extended in surprise. Explain. They refused to surrender. When boarding became inevitable, they activated their engine core. Not as a weapon. The detonation was contained and directed inward. Krell's voice resonance patterns indicated confusion. They destroyed themselves and all their data rather than be captured. Draz processed this information against the consortium's intelligence. Nothing had indicated this level of commitment from civilian scientists. Adjust tactical formations, he ordered after a moment's calculation. I want redundant surveillance on all human positions before we engage. If their non-combatants behave this way, we must reassess combat protocols. As his officers dispersed, Draz reviewed the final moments captured from the human survey ship. In the grainy footage, the human captain stared directly into the camera before detonation. There was no fear in her expression, only a cold determination that gave Draz his first unsettling glimpse of what might make these soft creatures dangerous after all. The agricultural colony of Harmony presented an optimal first target. Located 3 light-years beyond Earth's core defense network, the settlement boasted only 30,000 inhabitants, primarily farmers with minimal military presence. Orbital scans showed scattered townships connected by primitive ground transportation, vulnerable power infrastructure, and no planetary defense grid. Commander Draz synchronized his tactical display as Vorax Drak ships descended through the planet's atmosphere, riding the cover of a naturally occurring meteor shower. The operation had been meticulously planned. Simultaneously neutralize the colony's small defense outpost, communications array, and power distribution centers. By dawn of the local cycle, Harmony would stand as testament to Vorax efficiency and human frailty. Primary insertion teams away. Lieutenant Mox reported from the command ship. No detection signatures from human defense systems. Maintain stealth protocols until all teams are deployed. Draz ordered. I want this concluded before they organize any resistance. The first indication something was wrong came 18 minutes later. Strike Team Epsilon is offline, Krell announced, her crystalline form shifting in agitation. Last transmission indicated successful landing at the primary power facility. Before Draz could respond, 2 more strike teams went silent. This is unexpected, he admitted, adjusting the tactical projection. Launch the second wave immediately. Target their communications infrastructure directly. On the surface, former Earth Defense Force engineer Sarah Chen yanked a makeshift detonator from the modified harvester control panel. Sweat streaked her face despite the pre-dawn chill. That's 3 down, she told the assembled townspeople in the community hall. But they'll adapt quickly. The room was filled with farmers, teachers, and terraforming technicians, not soldiers, yet each face showed the same grim resolve as they gathered around a table covered with hastily drawn maps and modified agricultural equipment. Miguel, how long on those fertilizer bombs? Chen asked. A young agronomist looked up from his work. 20 minutes, but we're running low on catalyst. Use the hydroponic accelerant, advised an elderly woman. Less stable, but higher yield. Chen nodded, distributing teams by sector. Remember, they'll expect us to protect the colony center. We don't. We protect nothing but each other. Everything else is just bait. By local midday, Commander Draz faced a tactical situation unprecedented in his 5 centuries of warfare. 8 strike teams, nearly 100 elite Vorax warriors, had been lost to what planetary intelligence had classified as an agricultural settlement. Explain, he demanded of his senior officers. Tactical Officer Vrax's exoskeleton pulsed with agitation. They've modified their farming equipment into weapons. Harvester vehicles converted to mobile explosives. irrigation systems repurposed to deliver corrosive compounds that damage our environmental seals. And their defensive formation. Draz pressed. There is none, Commander, Krell admitted. They abandon positions as soon as we target them. They've scattered into the surrounding terrain in small units. When we pursue, they lead us into prepared traps. The main display showed footage from a Vorax warrior's visual feed, a human child appearing from behind a structure, fleeing when spotted. The Vorax squad pursued, only to have the ground beneath them collapse into a pit filled with burning agricultural chemicals that adhered to their exoskeletons. They're using their young as bait, Draz asked, genuinely disturbed. Most species the Vorax had encountered would sooner surrender than endanger their offspring. No, Krell corrected. Analysis suggests coordinated tactics. The children serve as lures while adults spring the traps. They're working in family units. Draz considered this information. Concentrate our forces on their central water processing facility. All humans require water. Force them to defend a fixed position. 3 hours later, Draz watched in disbelief as the humans executed their response. Rather than defend the water facility, they destroyed it themselves, contaminating the reservoir with agricultural compounds that rendered it useless to both sides. They've poisoned their own water supply, Vrax reported incredulously. Trace communication suggests they've cached supplies in the surrounding highlands. They sacrifice long-term survival for short-term tactical advantage, Draz observed, fascinating and disturbing. The command center fell silent as new data streamed in. The surviving Vorax forces had cornered a significant human resistance group in a geothermal processing plant. Victory seemed assured until the facility's thermal regulation system suddenly failed, deliberately sabotaged from within. The command feed showed the human leader, Chen, barricaded in the control room as scalding steam filled the compartments. A Vorax breaching team cut through the final door only to find her sitting calmly at the controls, making no move to escape. The audio capture caught her final words. Should have stayed in space. Her lips curled upward as she manually ruptured the main thermal exchange, engulfing herself and 30 Vorax warriors in superheated steam. The feed went dead. After 17 seconds of processing, an eternity for his species, Draz spoke. Recall all surface forces. Immediately. His officers stared in shock. They chose pain and death over surrender, Draz explained, his voice modulation betraying rare uncertainty, and they were smiling as they did it. As the withdrawal order transmitted, Draz reviewed the colony's casualty statistics. Vorax losses at 27% of deployed forces. Human losses estimated at 40% of colony population. Yet intercepted communication showed no distress signals sent to Earth. No pleas for rescue or reinforcement. Just a single tight beam transmission containing technical data on Vorax armor vulnerabilities, environmental tolerances, and tactical formations, all information the humans had gathered while being conquered. They weren't fighting to win, Draz realized. They were fighting to learn. This recording was extracted from a civilian entertainment database, xenobiologist Krell explained, as the display activated in the Vorax command ship's analysis chamber. The assembled Vorax officers watched footage of humans running across an arid landscape, not fleeing or pursuing, simply running. For hours, their bodies glistened with moisture loss, yet they continued forward under a punishing sun. They call this ultramarathon, Krell continued. Recreational endurance exercise. Note the facial expressions. Commander Draz's sensory filaments extended toward the display. The humans were smiling despite clear physiological distress. This makes no tactical sense, objected Lieutenant Vrax. Training that depletes resources without improving combat effectiveness. That's where you're mistaken, Krell countered. Archaeological evidence suggests humans evolved as persistence hunters. They pursued prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their bipedal locomotion, sweat-based cooling, and respiratory efficiency allow them to maintain moderate speeds for extraordinary durations. She transitioned the display to medical scans. Their bodies produce compounds called endorphins during physical stress. The greater the pain, the more intense the chemical reward. They derive pleasure from pain, asked the junior officer, crystalline form clouding with confusion. Precisely. What would incapacitate most species merely motivates them. Krell's presentation continued for 3 hours, covering aspects of human physiology and psychology that contradicted conventional tactical assumptions. The Vorax, who calculated all actions based on resource efficiency and survival probability, struggled to process human decision matrices. Their historical records are most revealing, Krell said, displaying footage from Earth's wars. They fought in trenches filled with toxic gas, continued functioning in radiation zones, and developed a concept called spite, the willingness to accept harm to inflict greater harm on enemies. The display shifted to urban ruins where small human groups survived after catastrophic weapons deployment. Most concerning is their cultural fixation on extinction scenarios, Krell continued. Humans produce entertainment simulating their civilization's collapse. They train for it. They imagine surviving it. She gestured to the final display, human fiction depicting post-apocalyptic scenarios. In their imaginations, they've already survived everything we could possibly do to them. Later, in Draz's private command chamber, his most trusted officers assembled for an unrecorded assessment. The consortium misrepresented the species, Draz stated. Their intelligence brief classified humans as expansion-oriented opportunists. Our findings suggest something more dangerous. Theoretical extinction events that would eliminate most galactic species appear in human recreational media. Perhaps they're simply imaginative, suggested Tactical Officer Sen. Imagination with purpose, Krell corrected. Every scenario they envision, they develop countermeasures for. Their military simulates fighting enemies they've never encountered. Officer Thez, youngest among them, displayed data from captured human communications. I've analyzed their historical conflicts. They possess a trait no other species demonstrates. They become more dangerous when losing. The display showed Earth's historical battle statistics. Other species conserve resources when facing defeat. Humans expend them at accelerating rates, developing improbable technologies and tactics when conventional options fail. The worse their situation, the more innovative they become. Draz absorbed this analysis silently before activating the secure channel to the Vorax homeworld. The crystalline visage of Elder Morphax appeared, the closest equivalent to political leadership in Vorax society. The consortium contract may have been accepted without adequate intelligence, Draz reported. Request increased resource allocation and authorization for assessment protocols beyond standard doctrine. The Elder's response was immediate. Clarify risk assessment. These humans, Draz hesitated, formulating words for a concept foreign to Vorax thinking. They don't calculate survival probability before action. They act, then survive by adapting to consequences. Their historical development occurred through intentional exposure to potentially fatal conditions. Elder Morphax's crystalline structure darkened. The Vorax equivalent of concern. This suggests non-standard cognition. More concerning, Draz continued, captured communications indicate unusual perception of death. They accept individual mortality while fighting to ensure group survival. Our traditional leverage points are ineffective. The Elder processed this information before responding. Assessment authorized. Additional resources approved. But Commander Draz, the Vorax have never failed a contract. Understood, Draz acknowledged, ending the transmission. He turned to find Krell still present, analyzing new data streams. You didn't share everything with the Elder, she observed. Some conclusions require verification, Draz replied. Krell's crystalline form pulsed with the Vorax equivalent of hesitation. I've been analyzing their pair bonding behaviors. They form attachments across genetic lines, even with non-humans. Their empathy extends beyond rational alliance structures. Tactical relevance, Draz prompted. They fight differently, protecting others than protecting themselves. More effectively. More creatively. Krell projected a battle recording from the Harmony colony, a human defender continuing to fight with a Vorax barb embedded in his chest, buying time for younger humans to escape. "Are we certain these are prey animals and not predators?" asked a voice from the chamber entrance. Junior Officer Mrek stood there, witnessing the analysis. Draz regarded the wounded human in the recording, still fighting beyond biological limits. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "they are both. And that is what makes them dangerous." All units in position. Lieutenant Vrax reported as the Vorax battle fleet emerged from subspace at precisely calculated coordinates. Planetary defenses detected but non-responsive. Commander Draz surveyed the tactical display. 3 human frontier worlds, New Montana, Proxima Colony, and Vesta Station, appeared as glowing targets, positioned at the vertices of an equilateral triangle in space. The simultaneous assault would demonstrate Vorax superiority while stretching human response capabilities beyond breaking point. "Commence primary bombardment," Draz ordered. "Target military installations only. I want their civilian populations intact to witness our efficiency." Streams of focused energy lanced from the Vorax vessels, bypassing the primitive defensive grids. On New Montana, the central military command structure vaporized in seconds. On Proxima Colony, the shipyards erupted in silent flame. On Vesta Station, the communications array disintegrated. "First phase successful," Krell confirmed. "No significant resistance detected." Draz's crystalline form pulsed with satisfaction. "Launch ground forces. Secure command centers and population hubs." The initial victories came swiftly. Human defensive emplacements fell before superior Vorax technology. Isolated resistance was crushed with methodical precision. By local midday on each world, the Vorax had established control over key infrastructure. Casualties minimal, Vrax reported. Human defenders retreating to secondary positions. Draz was about to issue the next phase of orders when the tactical display suddenly flashed with multiple alerts. "Unidentified vessels approaching all 3 targets," Krell announced, her tone modulating with surprise. "Configuration: non-standard." The display showed small, nimble ships emerging from behind planetary moons and asteroid fields, positions the Vorax sensors had scanned and dismissed as tactically irrelevant. Evasive patterns inconsistent with known human military doctrine. Vrax noted as the vessels executed maneuvers that subjected their hulls to structural stresses beyond safety parameters. The first impact came moments later. A human ship, engines burning beyond sustainable limits, collided directly with a Vorax dreadnought's command section. The explosion rippled through the larger vessel's systems, causing cascading failures. "They're sacrificing ships as kinetic weapons," Lieutenant Mox reported incredulously. "No attempt to engage conventionally." Similar reports flooded in from the other battlefronts. Human vessels, dramatically outgunned, converted themselves into projectiles rather than retreat. "Order fleet dispersal," Draz commanded. "Minimum safe distance between capital ships." On the planetary surfaces, the situation deteriorated just as rapidly. On New Montana, Vorax ground forces had cornered a human battalion in a narrow mountain pass, only to have the humans detonate the surrounding geology, burying themselves and their attackers in tons of rock. "They're laughing," reported a shaken junior officer monitoring communications. "The humans in the pass. Intercepts show them making amusement vocalizations before triggering the explosives." Draz processed this information against Krell's psychological reports. "The humans demonstrate commitment beyond rational resource preservation. Adjust tactics accordingly." Captain Elena Vasquez of Earth Defense Force wiped blood from her eyes as she studied the makeshift tactical display in Proxima Colony's subterranean emergency bunker. 3 Vorax assault teams were systematically sweeping through the settlement above. "Evacuation status," she demanded. 60% complete, her second-in-command reported. "Civilian transports are clear of the gravity well." Vasquez nodded. "Execute protocol threshold." Around her, the remaining defenders moved with practiced efficiency, placing modified terraforming charges at structural weak points throughout the underground complex. All personnel clear except final team, came the confirmation. Good. Vasquez picked up a small container and placed it carefully on the command table before activating her communicator. All units, final verification. Is the gift ready? A chorus of affirmatives responded. Remember, she said, her voice steady, this isn't just about survival. It's about education. As her team evacuated through concealed tunnels, Vasquez made a final check of the container, filled with food rations, medical supplies, and translated copies of an ancient text titled The Art of War. Attached was a handwritten note. Thank you for being worthy opponents. We look forward to your evolution. When the Vorax breaching team finally secured the command center, they found only the container and automated detonators counting down. Back on the command ship, Draz reviewed the accumulated after-action reports with growing concern. The human counterattacks made no strategic sense by Vorax standards. They sacrificed technology and personnel at unsustainable rates, yet showed no signs of surrender. They're treating their ships as projectiles, Lieutenant Mox reported. No attempt to preserve assets. And these offerings? Draz inquired, examining images of the containers left behind in abandoned human positions. Krell's analysis appeared on the display. The items appear to be survival supplies and information storage devices containing human tactical doctrines. Notes indicate appreciation for the conflict. Before Draz could respond, Officer Sen interrupted. Commander, Psychological Operations Division requests immediate reassignment. Explain, Draz demanded. Chief Analyst Texel has submitted her resignation after reviewing human communications intercepts, Sen reported. Her final assessment states, these creatures fight not because they hate what's before them, but because they love what's behind them. We have no psychological framework for this. Draz absorbed this, crystalline form darkening with the Vorax equivalent of deep concern. After 17 seconds of processing, he issued new orders. Consolidate our positions, prepare for protracted engagement, and assemble a specialized team to analyze these human gifts. If they wish to educate us, perhaps we should learn. The command nexus of the Vorax flagship pulsed with electromagnetic activity, as Officer Thez struggled to isolate the source of the interference. It's everywhere, she reported, crystalline form vibrating with agitation. All communication bands simultaneously. Commander Draz extended a sensory filament toward the audio feed. A rhythmic pattern emerged, organized sound following mathematical progressions too precise to be random, yet too chaotic to decode. Human music, Krell identified, having studied Earth's cultural transmissions, specifically a form called heavy metal with percussion rates calibrated to interfere with our crystalline resonance patterns. How did they identify our communication frequencies? Vrax demanded. Before anyone could respond, the music abruptly ceased, replaced by something far more disturbing, the voices of human children reciting poetry in perfect Vorax language. The phonetic precision was unsettling, each syllable delivered with the exact resonance frequency to stimulate Vorax communication receptors. The crystal warriors from stars beyond sang the children's chorus, mistake our softness for our bond. Draz silenced the transmission with a sharp gesture. Psychological warfare. Basic intimidation tactics. Not basic, Krell corrected, displaying analysis results. The pronunciation requires understanding of our auditory processing. The children were specifically trained to communicate with our species. Lieutenant Mox's exoskeleton pulsed with unease. How long have they been studying us? Draz had no answer. In the habitation sector of Proxima Colony, now under Vorax control, Commander Trill led his squad through emptied human dwellings. Their mission was straightforward: sweep for remaining resistance and secure any intelligence materials. Structure clear, reported a scout, emerging from a small dwelling. Trill was about to order the team forward when a noise drew his attention. A soft, rhythmic sound from a building they had already cleared. His sensors detected no life signs, yet the sound persisted. Inside, they found a small device on a table, emitting the noise. Beside it lay a handwritten note in Vorax script, for Trill's squad only. Others lacked the courage to hear this. The personalized message triggered immediate alarm protocols, but curiosity overrode caution. Trill activated the device. A human voice spoke clearly in his native language. "We've studied you for decades. You evolved in high-radiation environments, your crystalline structures propagating through mineral absorption rather than conventional reproduction. Your juvenile forms remain dormant in protected caverns on your homeworld. We've mapped all 17 nursery complexes. We know how your young are grown." The message continued with exacting details about Vorax physiology, including precise frequencies that could disrupt their neural patterns. "We've prepared specialties for each organ in your bodies," the voice concluded pleasantly. "This has been a message from the Earth Xenobiology Corps. Please share with Commander Draz." When the scout team failed to report in, a secondary unit found them still functional but unresponsive, their crystalline forms clouded with the Vorax equivalent of psychological trauma. "They're not attacking our positions," Vorax reported with growing confusion. "They're infiltrating, leaving survivors, then withdrawing." Draz studied the pattern of human incursions across all 3 occupied worlds. Small commando teams surgically penetrated Vorax defensive lines, engaged briefly, then disappeared, but not before ensuring Vorax survivors witnessed their tactics and carried messages back. "They're conditioning our forces," Krell realized. Each survivor becomes a vector for psychological contagion. The strategy defied conventional military doctrine. Instead of concentrating force against Vorax strongholds, humans struck in seemingly random patterns, following no discernible strategic objective. "All of this," Draz said slowly, processing the accumulated data, "to communicate with us. Why not simply open diplomatic channels?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The Vorax research vessel Crystalline Thought had captured a human Special Forces soldier during an incursion on New Montana. The scientists transported the specimen to their laboratory for vivisection, hoping to understand human biological capabilities. The preliminary scan results now displayed on Draz's command screen. "Genetic modification," Krell noted with alarm. "Acid sacs embedded near major organs, designed to rupture upon death. Self-destruct mechanisms to prevent biological intelligence gathering. The modifications are voluntary," added the chief researcher's report. "Scaring patterns indicate surgical implantation with conscious consent." The feed from the laboratory suddenly distorted. The human prisoner, despite being fully restrained, had dislocated her own shoulder joint, the bone visibly separated as she reached toward a concealed device in her uniform. "Security protocol," shouted the researcher. But too late. A localized electromagnetic pulse surged through the laboratory, destroying all equipment and research data. When the emergency systems reactivated, the human prisoner was dead, the acid sacs having ruptured as designed, dissolving all tissue of potential intelligence value. In his private command chamber, Draz reviewed the accumulated evidence with his most trusted officers. "These aren't the actions of a species fighting for survival," he concluded. "They're fighting to communicate something specific." "Terror," suggested Vrax. "They seek to instill fear rather than defeat us conventionally." "There's a word they use in their transmissions," Krell added. "Deterrence. They don't want to defeat us. They want us to fear them enough to withdraw." "Is it working?" asked Junior Officer Mrek softly. The command chamber fell silent, the question hanging unanswered in the recycled atmosphere as the distant sound of human music began filtering through the ship's communication systems once again. "Priority transmission incoming," announced Lieutenant Vrax. "Origin point, Earth Central Command." Commander Draz's crystalline structure shifted subtly, the Vorax equivalent of surprise. Throughout the conflict, Earth had maintained communication silence, responding only through military action. A direct transmission represented a significant tactical shift. Security protocols engage, Krell confirmed. No embedded data weapons detected. Display, Draz ordered. The holographic projection materialized in the command center. A human female in a formal military uniform adorned with symbols of rank. Her dark hair was secured tightly, face composed with what Krell's briefings identified as controlled calm. "This is Admiral Helena Choi of United Earth Defense Command," she began without preamble. "I address Commander Draz of the Vorax mercenary fleet directly." Draz's sensory appendages extended in surprise at the use of his name and title. "We are transmitting evidence of the Galactic Consortium's duplicity," continued Admiral Choi. "The contract issued for Earth's subjugation contains coded provisions your translation systems would have missed. Data packets streamed alongside the transmission, financial records, meeting transcripts, and strategic assessments from Consortium archives. Our intelligence operatives intercepted these communications 18 standard months ago," Choi explained. "The Consortium never expected you to succeed against Earth. They anticipated mutual attrition that would weaken both our species sufficiently for their direct intervention." Krell processed the incoming data, her crystalline structure darkening with agitation. "Verification complete. These carry Consortium encryption signatures. They appear authentic." The transmission continued as more files appeared. Detailed schematics of Vorax breeding chambers and defense systems that should have been unknown to any outsider. "The Consortium has observed our species' historical conflicts and concluded we are too aggressive to coexist with their vision of galactic stability," Choi stated. "They have made similar assessments of the Vorax. We were both deemed unpredictably innovative and therefore dangerous." Draz processed this information against known Consortium behaviors. The assessment aligned with their methodologies, using proxies to eliminate potential threats while maintaining diplomatic deniability. "Unlike the Consortium," Admiral Choi continued, "we fight our own battles. Unlike the Vorax, we offer choices before destruction. I propose a direct meeting to discuss terms that would benefit both our species while addressing the Consortium's manipulation." The transmission included coordinates for a neutral location and diplomatic protocols. "As evidence of our sincerity," she concluded, "all Vorax prisoners are being released immediately." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. On New Montana, Vorax Lieutenant Sen watched with crystalline appendages vibrating in confusion as the holding cells opened. The human guard stepped back, making no move to prevent the Vorax prisoners from leaving. Each released prisoner received a small device. Sen's contained a personalized medical implant designed specifically for his crystalline composition, repairing fracture lines sustained during combat. Accompanying it was a translator containing a message from the human soldier who had captured him. "Your tactics on the northern ridge were impressive," it read. "If we meet again, I hope it's not as enemies. My name is Michael Chen. I have 3 offspring. Like you, I fight to ensure their future." Similar scenes played out across all 3 occupied worlds as Vorax prisoners received treatment for injuries along with personal messages from their human captors. "This is without precedent," Vrax stated in the Emergency War Council. "No species has ever released Vorax prisoners during active conflict. It's psychological warfare beyond our doctrine," Draz admitted, reviewing the compiled reports. "Each released prisoner becomes a vector for their message." "The Consortium's duplicity is confirmed," Krell added. "Multiple verification protocols validate the human intelligence." "Could this be elaborate deception?" asked Junior Officer Mrek. "Possible but improbable," Krell responded. "The resource expenditure would be irrational compared to conventional warfare." Draz was about to speak when his private communication channel activated. The message was encoded for his neural patterns only, impossible according to Vorax encryption standards. The display showed footage of his private dwelling on the Vorax homeworld, the hatching chamber where his progeny crystals grew. The timestamp showed it was recorded recently. Human operatives were clearly visible in the background, their environmental suits adapted to the extreme conditions, but they made no move to approach the sensitive crystals. The message was simple. We could have. We chose not to. Choice is humanity's greatest weapon. Draz's crystalline structure darkened to near opacity, the deepest expression of Vorax concern. Humans had penetrated not just Vorax military defenses, but reached the homeworld itself, infiltrating the most sacred and protected location in their society. And they had chosen restraint. This is not a species fighting for survival, Draz finally said to his assembled officers. This is a species offering a choice none has offered us before. What choice? Asked Frax. Alliance rather than subjugation, Draz replied. They fight differently than any species we've encountered because their objective is different. They don't seek to destroy us. They seek to change us. The command center fell silent as the implications settled through their crystalline neural networks like fractures spreading through perfect structures. The question remains, Krell said finally. How long have they been watching us? How deeply have they penetrated our society? Draz studied the image of his untouched hatching chamber once more. Long enough, he answered, to know exactly where to apply pressure and where to show mercy. The Vorax War Council chamber had never hosted such discord. Crystalline forms pulsed with electromagnetic signaling as competing factions argued their positions. The normal unanimity of Vorax decision-making had fractured under the pressure of the human conflict. This discussion borders on contract violation, declared Senior Commander Regax, his ancient exoskeleton bearing fracture lines from hundreds of campaigns. The Vorax have never failed a contract in 1,000 cycles. Our reputation is the foundation of our society. The contract was secured through deception, countered Krell, projecting the consortium's encrypted directives. The terms themselves contain provisions for our eventual elimination once human resistance has depleted our forces. Commander Draz observed the division among his officers, an unprecedented development. Vorax society operated on absolute hierarchy and unified purpose. Yet now, the council chamber had split into factions. Traditionalists insisting on contract fulfillment regardless of cost, and younger officers advocating for strategic reassessment. Our casualties have reached 36% of deployed forces, reported Lieutenant Vrax. Projection models indicate minimal territorial gains, even with reinforcements. Then we deploy planet killers, suggested a junior officer, her crystalline form still unmarked by battle. The humans cannot adapt to extinction. The chamber fell silent at this proposal. The Vorax possessed weapons capable of rendering planetary surfaces uninhabitable, technology considered too destabilizing to use except in the most extreme circumstances. You misunderstand our opponent, Krell responded finally. They've been fighting themselves for millennia. They've imagined every possible apocalypse. There's evidence they've been preparing for existential conflicts since before they left their atmosphere. She projected human historical records, nuclear standoffs, climate adaptation colonies, deep underground survival bunkers, and orbital habitats designed to function independently of their homeworld. Earth is not their only refuge, Krell continued, and our analysis suggests they've prepared contingencies for planetary devastation since their primitive atomic age. They possess distributed infrastructure specifically designed to survive apocalyptic scenarios. The debate intensified, with the younger officers arguing for withdrawal while the veterans insisted on escalation. The deadlock seemed unbreakable until a junior communications officer entered the chamber, her crystalline structure vibrating with urgency. Commander, she addressed Draz directly, bypassing protocol. New intelligence from homeworld security networks. The display activated, showing sensor readings from the space surrounding the Vorax homeworld. Human vessels, not warships but stealthy observation platforms, had been detected in high orbit. Analysis confirms they've been present for at least 12 standard cycles, the officer reported. They're not attacking, merely observing. The revelation that humans could strike at the Vorax heart while simultaneously defending their colonies silenced even the most aggressive council members. Draz reviewed the accumulated data, casualty reports showing 40% losses with minimal territorial gains, evidence of consortium manipulation, and now confirmation that Earth had achieved strategic positioning around the Vorax homeworld itself. "We face an opponent unlike any in our operational history," he stated finally. "They do not fight for territory or resources. They fight to communicate, to intimidate," corrected Commander Regax. "They seek to break our resolve through psychological warfare." "Perhaps," Draz acknowledged, "but their actions demonstrate restraint alongside capability. They could have targeted our breeding chambers. Instead, they revealed their position to show they choose not to strike." The chamber fell silent as the implications resonated through their crystalline neural networks. "The consortium sent us to be worn down by an enemy they knew we couldn't defeat conventionally," Draz continued. "They anticipated our destruction, or at minimum, significant weakening that would leave our homeworld vulnerable to their direct intervention." He projected Admiral Choi's transmission alongside the consortium contract terms. "I'm accepting the human parley," he announced. Commander Regax's crystalline structure darkened to near opacity, the deepest expression of disapproval possible in Vorax communication. "This is surrender," he accused. "The first in our history." Draz faced his oldest companion, sensory filaments extended in what humans would recognize as a gesture of respect. "The humans have a concept they call mutual respect," he replied. "They've demonstrated it by sparing our young, when they could have eliminated our future generations. It may be our only shield against their concept of total war, a form of conflict our species has never encountered and cannot comprehend." He turned to address the assembled council. "I will lead a delegation to Earth. We will hear their terms. The Vorax have never failed a contract, but neither have we faced an enemy who fights not to destroy us, but to change our understanding of conflict itself." As the council dispersed, Lieutenant Mox approached Draz privately. "Commander," he said, his young crystalline form still adjusting to the concept of uncertainty, "what will we do if the humans demand unconditional surrender?" Draz considered the question, his sensory appendages processing the fragmentary understanding he'd gained of human psychology. "They won't," he answered finally. "That's what makes them dangerous, and potentially valuable allies. They understand something our species is only beginning to grasp. True strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice not to when one could." Commander Draz had prepared extensively for imprisonment, or more likely, execution. Vorax tradition demanded the ceremonial shattering of defeated leaders. As his shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere toward a location humans called Geneva, he mentally composed the final thought patterns that would be extracted from his crystalline remains and preserved in the ancestral memory banks. Instead, the Vorax delegation found themselves escorted to a formal diplomatic reception. Commander Draz greeted Admiral Helena Choi, extending her hand in what Krell had briefed was a human gesture of peaceful intent. "Welcome to Earth." The chamber contained representatives of human governance rather than military commanders. The walls displayed not conquest trophies, but artistic representations of Earth's diverse environments. The Vorax delegation's specialized environmental suits had been unnecessary. The humans had adjusted atmospheric conditions to Vorax comfort parameters. "We expected less." "Accommodation," Draz admitted, sensory appendages extended cautiously. "Why?" asked a human official. "You're not our prisoners. You're our guests." The diplomatic proceedings that followed defied all Vorax predictions. Rather than demands for reparations, the humans proposed a complex alliance structure. The Vorax would retain complete autonomy, but join Earth in confronting the consortium's manipulations. "Our analysis suggests they've been using this strategy for centuries," explained Dr. Marcus Chen, Earth's Sinopolitical liaison, "pitting potentially cooperative species against each other to prevent alliances that might challenge their dominance." The evidence was compelling. Archaeological data showing similar patterns with now extinct civilizations. Communication intercepts revealing consortium discussions of containment protocols for both humans and Orcs. We believe they fear innovation that doesn't originate within their control structures, Admiral Choi continued. Both our species prioritize adaptation over stability. They find us unpredictable. Draz processed this assessment against Vorac's historical records. The terms you propose are unexpectedly equitable. What assurance do you require for compliance? Admiral Choi's expression shifted to what Krell identified as amusement. We've prepared a demonstration that should address that question, she replied. The demonstration began with transport to a facility humans called a university. Inside, Draz observed young humans engaged in competitive physical activities. We call these sports, explained Dr. Chen. Competitive simulations of combat skills developed for recreation. The Vorac's delegation watched as humans deliberately collided with each other, sustained injuries, then continued participating, often laughing. They damaged themselves voluntarily, asked Lieutenant Vrax, crystalline structure clouding with confusion. They pushed their physical limits deliberately, corrected Chen. It's how we improve. The tour continued through facilities where humans exposed themselves to environmental extremes, wilderness survival training, and extreme athletics, for no apparent purpose beyond personal challenge. Most disturbing was the culinary demonstration, where humans consumed compounds that triggered pain receptors, spicy food, alongside substances that temporarily impaired neural function, alcohol, while socializing. They poisoned themselves for pleasure, Krell inquired, recording everything for analysis. We call it acquired taste, Chen responded. The initial discomfort creates a neural pathway that eventually registers as enjoyment. The final stop was a historical museum showcasing humanity's evolution from primitive hunter-gatherers to spacefaring civilization. Each exhibit highlighted innovations born from conflict, disasters that became opportunities, and catastrophes that sparked new development paths. We've been trying to stop fighting each other for centuries, Admiral Choi explained, as they viewed displays of Earth's past wars. But it's left us very, very good at it. She gestured toward a modern exhibit showing Earth's first encounters with non-human intelligence. We would rather explore than conquer, cooperate than dominate. But our history has prepared us to defend ourselves with extreme creativity when necessary. As the diplomatic team prepared the formal alliance documentation, Draz found himself alone with Admiral Choi in an observation deck overlooking Earth's Swiss landscape. I must ask, he said finally, if we had continued fighting, what was your species' next plan? Choi's expression shifted to what humans called a smile, a facial configuration that Draz now recognized not as aggression, but as a complex emotional signal. We hadn't made one yet, she admitted. That's what makes us dangerous. We improvise best when cornered. For the first time in his extensive military career, Draz felt something beyond tactical calculation, a sensation his neural matrix identified as relief that he had chosen diplomacy over continued conflict. I believe I understand now, he said, crystalline structure refracting sunlight in patterns that signified deep contemplation. Your species hasn't evolved to fight wars. You've evolved to challenge yourselves constantly, making your entire existence a preparation for conflict. Choi nodded. While the consortium values stability above all, humans thrive on change. We seek out challenges rather than avoid them. It makes us unpredictable allies, but formidable enemies. As the formal surrender and alliance documents were finalized, the Vorac's delegation recognized a fundamental truth. In humans, they had encountered a species too fundamentally frightening to fight. Not because of superior technology or numbers, but because humans viewed obstacles as opportunities rather than threats. The consortium's plan had indeed backfired spectacularly. Instead of mutual destruction, they had catalyzed an alliance between the two species they most feared, one that evolved through mineral accumulation, achieving perfect efficiency, and another that evolved through constant adaptation, achieving perfect resilience. As Commander Draz affixed his crystalline signature to the Alliance document, he added a personal note in human English. "We surrendered not to your weapons, but to your incomprehensible nature, and look forward to learning it."